Hello, I'm back with part 2 of part 2 of 4 Creepy Night Drive horror stories. This is by, all credits go to Unit 522, so let's get on with part 2.
A friend of mine told me this story about a girl she met from Sweden who was staying with her for a while. The girl was in her mid-20s, and while my friend told me her name, I can't remember it. I only remember the content of this horrific story, and it will never leave my mind. So this girl, let's call her Jan, was driving to her mom's house. They lived away from the city, in a heavily forested area. There was no streetlights, and not many houses. If there were any houses, they were built back into the forest, and had long winding driveways before any sign of life. Jan was in her late teens at the time. As she was driving, something up ahead on the road caught her eye. It was a small bundle next to the road. It looked like a baby wrapped up in a blanket. Jane slammed on her brakes, stopping about 50 meters up the road. She backed up her car, and then jumped out as quick as she could, thinking that someone had abandoned a baby on the road. Jan ran over to the bundle and exhaled a sigh of relief. It was only a toy. Just as she picked up the baby, she saw headlights coming down the road in front of her. Suddenly realizing that she was standing on the road alone at night, she ran quickly back to her car and jumped in. The car behind her sped up, closing in quickly, coming up very close to the back of her car, and began honking its horn. Jan started to panic, and she began to drive faster and faster, constantly checking her rearview mirror. Eventually, she reached her mother's driveway. Her mom lived deep in the woods, and she thought to herself if the car followed her down the long driveway, she would call her mom and tell her to phone the police. As she turned into the driveway, the car turned as well, still following very close behind her. She kept thinking back to the baby toy found on the side of the road, and how creepy this evening was turning out to be. Jane then pulled out her phone and called her mom, and told her that she was being followed, and to call the police right away. She was expected to arrive in about 5 minutes. Both cars were going way too fast on that narrow dirt road with no streetlights. She then saw her mom's house in the distance, but the pursuers were still very close behind her, still blaring their horns so loudly Jane's ears began to ring. As she got to the house, she jumped out of the car. Her mom was standing on the front porch waiting for her with a kitchen knife. Jane ran up to her as quickly as she could. The car that was following also stopped, and the doors flew open. An elderly couple jumped out and started to yell and point at Jane's car. "Hey, someone's in the back seat of your car!" they screamed. Jane then realized what happened. A man jumped out of the back seat of her car and took off into the forest. Everyone looked at each other in shock. The car that was coming down the road had seen someone jump into her car when she stopped to check out the bundle. They had most likely left it there on the road, waiting for people to stop. As I said at the beginning, a friend of mine told me this story, and I believe it to be true. If you're ever on the road and you stop to check something, always lock your doors when you get out of your car. I have trouble sleeping at night. I'm not going to whine and complain about having insomnia. I just can't sleep at night. Some say I have an anxiety problem. Others say I just need to take pills. But I've never gone to a doctor about it. Instead, I just get in my truck and drive around for about an hour at night to relax and unwind. Usually it works, and while expensive, I do sleep well through the night with no problems. I live in Lubbock, Texas. For those of you who know the area, you know that once you leave, it's several miles in either direction before you reach another town. And even when you do get to the next town, it's so small that you could throw a stone across it, and it would be out before it hits the ground. Driving on Highway 84, it's a long way before you hit the town of Littlefield. It's a nice drive to make when you're alone. Very calm, quiet, and dark. The kind of drive that almost puts you to sleep behind the wheel. It was a typical cold late January night. I recently started up classes at Texas Tech, and I was feeling a bit stressed. So I did what I always do around midnight when I can't sleep. I grabbed my keys, threw on my coat, got a small cup of warm coffee, and hopped in my truck. I took Highway 84 that night as I hadn't driven on the road since I came back from winter break. As I made my way down the long stretch of open road between Shallow-Water and Anton, I heard a tap on my passenger side window. I figured that it was a rock or something and ignored it, but then I heard it again. It was 3 distinct taps on my passenger window, like someone was trying to get my attention. I turned my head to look out the window, and to this day, I wish I hadn't. Staring back at me with black eyes was a man. His face was pale, almost gray, sitting in the dead center of the window, smiling. That smile was the most evil thing I've ever seen. He bore all of his teeth with his wide smile. They were pearly white, and not one of them was out of place. His hair was jet black and short, almost like something out of the 1950s. But that smile, that never-ending grin he wore, has been etched into my mind forever. I jumped and jerked my truck slightly into the other lane, before recovering and straightening out again. I had taken my eye off the window, hoping that what I saw was just a hallucination. I looked back, and he was still there, just smiling at me like he had been waiting to see me. He raised his hand and started waving at me. I turned my head forward and stared straight ahead. I jerked my truck into the left lane, and then swung it back to the right, but I didn't look to see if he was gone. I was too afraid to look. I kept telling myself to keep my eyes on the road, and find a place to turn around. Then I see something out of the corner of my eye. I glance over, and it's the man. He was running on all fours, naked. My jaw dropped.
You?
I was going 75 miles per hour. I floored it and raced away from the guy. I then heard him jump into the back of my truck. I checked my rearview mirror, and there he was, staring back at me, still smiling. I'm almost in tears at this point. I find a turnaround and slam on the brakes and check my rear view. He never moved. It was like he had no momentum at all. I didn't look to make the turn. I just did it, and I hit the gas as soon as I was on the road again. I didn't bother to look at the speed limit. As far as I'm concerned, this was an emergency. I returned to Lubbock without the thing in the back of my truck. I know this because as I turned onto my street, he was standing on my front porch, waving at me.
That's creepy.
There's always a reason to be afraid.
So that's it for this video. Please click the like button, subscribe, and subscribe to Unit 522 as well. All the credit goes to him, and he's a very good YouTuber. Subscribe to him, and put a comment section in the comment section below to let me know what you thought of the video. Thank you for watching.